Hello from Maui, everyone. I'm here to do your Chapter 7 Lifelong Learning um, lecture. This will be a short lecture, but it is going to be interactive, so I will need one of you to come and pause the video if Michaela is working on another task, if you would be so kind as to support, because you're going to have some reflections along the way, one of which is a little bit more time intensive. So this chapter is talking about lifelong learning, and lifelong learning is essential, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I want you to go back to that growth mindset concept. Remember, we took that growth mindset assessment, and all of you were able to determine whether you had a growth or fixed mindset. The majority of you have a growth mindset. So some characteristics about growth mindset is, in fact, lifelong learning. It's learning from your mistakes, and those continue to happen throughout life, both personally and professionally. It's about being committed to improving by working hard, by finding resources, by using new strategies. It's a mindset that is committed to never giving up and always trying a new option or figuring out where the opportunity for growth and learning is. It's about being determined to do your absolute best and strive for your best, and that in and of itself requires continuous learning. It's about self-reflection and consistently being introspective and figuring out what you can do to better succeed. And it's about overcoming challenges. And that requires gathering information, learning new strategies and approaches, maybe figuring out who might be good resources and mentors for you, and a consistent retraining of the brain and watering of the brain. I like to think of it as watering your brain, watering your soul and your spirit so you can continuously grow. So let's talk about your perspectives, and I'm going to have you tell me what lifelong learning is to you. So stop the video, jot down on your notepads, what does lifelong learning mean to you? Why does it matter to you? Why do you think that's important? Okay, so lifelong learning affects every aspect of your life, every domain of your life. From a spiritual perspective, you're consistently learning about your faith and the principles and practices of your faith, and relearning, and sometimes new messages appear with every subsequent lesson. It impacts your family life in that you have to take in new information as your family enters different stages of life. Buying a home is a lesson, buying a car is a lesson, renting a new place is a lesson, having a baby is a lesson, learning how to parent effectively as they grow through life is a lesson. It's going to affect you professionally, and that you're always going to be learning new strategies. For those of you who are pursuing automotive, cars aren't the same as they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So you're always going to be learning new technologies, new equipment, and new methodology. You have to continuously learn so you can take care of your health and well-being. And then obviously your community needs lifelong learning so it can continue to thrive and overcome barriers and challenges. In addition to just being relevant to every area of your life, lifelong learning also affects your overall well-being. So in health psychology, or just in health education, we talk about the 8 dimensions of well-being, and that overlaps with the domains. And you have to intentionally take care of your health in each of these areas in order to thrive. And they all overlap and affect one another. Lifelong learning will help you thrive. Notice that intellectual is in fact an area of wellness. If you are feeding your intellectual health and well-being, it spills over into these other areas of wellness, and it promotes overall psychological and physical health and well-being. Those two things intersect. If you're not well psychologically, it undermines your physical health. If you're not well physically, it can undermine your psychological health. So they all interact. You can develop growth mindset and build growth mindset and critical thinking throughout your life. And this critical thinking is necessary. Growth mindset is necessary. So think about your brain as a muscle, is what your book says. And that's often how we think about it in psychology, where you have to exercise it to keep it strong. But I'm going to encourage you to think of your mindset like an engine. You have to build it. You have to tune it up. You have to do some checkups on it and make sure that it's functioning properly. And that's what I want you to do with your mindset. Reflect on your internal thinking. Practice that metacognition. Acknowledge the mindset that you're maintaining, and whether it's self-sabotaging, like we talked about in the last chapter, or whether or not it's healthy and empowering. And then reframe it when you need to. Make those tweaks and adjustments just as any good mechanic would. Set learning and performance goals for it. And remember to break those down into smaller goals and into the components. Understand the resources needed to achieve those goals. What tools do you need in your toolbox? And then seek feedback. Seek out resources that can help you with that. You don't have a particular tool, borrow one from a friend, right? If you don't know how to do a particular thing, ask someone to come mentor you and teach you, or seek out the instructions by going to a manual or other sources of information. And change course when needed. You might be trying one particular strategy to install something and it's not working, so you have to adapt, adjust, troubleshoot, and change up your game plan. Maybe a particular tool doesn't get into the space you need to, so you have to work something out and get another tool. So I want you to go through, and this is where you're going to pause the video, and you're going to keep it paused for a little bit. But go to page 187 in your textbook, and there's an inventory on your learning preferences. I want you to, it's a 2-page inventory. I want you to go through that inventory and inventory what is your learning preference. How do you learn best? What style do you use? Oops, it says total YouTube scores. That means total your scores. When you're all done, total all the scores that you have, and then get your final total on your thinking, on your doing, on your feeling, and on your innovating. So those of you who prefer to learn by thinking, by analysis, by reading, by gathering information, by analyzing that information. Those of you who prefer to learn by hands-on, actually getting your hands dirty in the work, doing something, producing something. Some of you may learn through your feelings and through your emotions and through your intuition, and you want to connect with the content that you're learning. And some of you maybe want to be innovative in your learning approach, and you need creative, dynamic ways that you can think about the information in a new and novel way. So score yourself. The very bottom, it tells you what those scores mean for each of the categories, and record those in your notes. Then read the information on the table. For whatever reason, my keyboard was in another language, so the spell check is off, so ignore it. Read the information on tables page 201 through 203, and this is a pretty detailed table. So you're going to have me off for some time, and I want you to read through all the things that correspond with your learning preference. List 5 things that you feel are really great descriptors of you from those tables. What describes you well? And then add 1 thing that you think is not on the list but is really important about how you learn. Add 1 more thing that's not already on the table for me. So when you're all done, you're going to have an outline on your notes of what your scores are for each of the learning styles, what they mean, and you're going to have a list of 6 things. 5 things from the table that talk about your learning style that are really descriptive of you, and 1 thing that is additional that's not already reflected on the table. When you're ready to move on, then you can go on and think about higher order thinking. So higher order thinking is more of the critical thinking. This is what makes us intelligent human beings, not just animals, but intelligent human beings. We are able to engage in that critical thinking, that reasoning, that deductive reasoning, that inductive reasoning, that analysis and problem solving, and make informed, educated decisions. This is a skill set that can be taught. We do explicitly teach it in Western education systems, like learning how to do science, doing a science fair project in fourth grade, fifth grade, continuing those scientific principles throughout life, even into college. So it is something that we expose you to. You should gain experience, but you also gain experience in the real world. I would argue you gain experience in the auto shop, right? Every time you have to figure out why this particular engine isn't working. And yes, you can plug it in and it gives you some codes and it tells you on the computer what those codes mean and where you can look. But sometimes that actually isn't the right answer. Or not all cars have that feature. And you have to figure out what's causing the problem. Sometimes clients can tell you some symptoms, right? What do they hear? What's a sound that it's making? What are the circumstances when it has the mechanical problem? And you can do deductive reasoning there. But it does develop with age as our frontal lobes continue to develop, develops with time and experience as we get to practice critical thinking. And it is also fundamental to our success in every area of life. You cannot go through life like a sheep. You have to go through life critically evaluating the information available to you and making educated, informed decisions about your life, intentional decisions. So I want to help you build thinking skills. The chapter talks about 3 elements to build those thinking skills: constructing logical arguments, asking probing questions, and applying critical thinking. And I've added a chart over here, which is Bloom's taxonomy. We use this in education because our goal is not just to help you remember a bunch of content or even to understand that content. Our goal is to move you up on this pyramid so you can apply that content in the various areas of your life to help make better decisions and help achieve your goals. So you can create new concepts, tools, resources, strategies, innovations, technologies, companies, whatever they might be. So you can evaluate information and decisions and make good, well thought out decisions for yourself. You can critique your options and judge circumstances in a way to determine what makes sense for you, what's a good fit for you. And you can analyze information. You can categorize it, examine it, organize it, compare it. You can find where its strengths are, where its weaknesses are, and how it may or may not relate to other information. So let's break those steps down and talk about how you actually go through constructing logical arguments. You want to ask those probing questions, right? So think about asking questions about the conclusions that you drew. Was it based on flawed evidence? Like people are against vaccinations because there was actually fabricated and faulty research that falsely said that it was connected to autism. In fact, that's not the case. That researcher actually fabricated their evidence, was kicked out of the research field, lost their licenses and standing, and no longer does research. Unfortunately, people glommed onto it and continue to think that autism is connected to vaccinations, so they're not vaccinating their children. Now we're seeing higher death rates of children from things like measles that have been effectively eradicated with vaccines. So make sure that the conclusions that you're drawing are based on factual evidence, not faulty information and not faulty logic. Also, ask questions about, what you believe and why you believe it. Why do you feel a particular way? What is informing your position? Can you define and articulate that concept thoroughly and in detail? Or are you just kind of echoing things that have been said? You need to understand things for yourself before you commit to them. Are there gaps in your knowledge? Do you need more information in some areas? And what are you doing to research that and seek that knowledge out? Does it make sense? Is it objective? From a third-party perspective, does it make sense? And these are objective, impartial third parties. What evidence is there to support your particular position? And is that evidence reliable? Have you looked at other perspectives and other points of view? And how might you learn and gain some additional awareness and insight from looking at those other perspectives? You have to be able to consider all your choices in order to make a critical choice. And are there exceptions to your perspective? Why? Why not? What does the exception tell you about the general premise? Are you substituting emotion? Are you making decisions and constructing a worldview based on a feeling rather than an informed perspective? Question your source of information, not just your position, but where you got the information. Was it reliable? Are they an expert in their field? If they're not an expert in that field, then they're not a reliable source. Politicians shouldn't be telling us what we should think about any concept that they are not directly educated on. They should be consulting with the experts in the field. I don't want them making my medical decisions about whether a vaccine is helpful. I just want them to make sure the policy's in place to make it available to me, if I so choose. Is the evidence true, objective, unbiased, current, and relevant? Is it relevant to the topic? Sometimes we come up with this argument and it doesn't even make sense for our perspective. And is there enough evidence? One piece of information is not sufficient. That information should be reliable. It should be valid, reliable, and have multiple sources that establish its credibility. Is there contradicting evidence? Like, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that eggs are bad for us, and then eggs are good for us, and then eggs are bad for us. There's contradictory information. You need to be able to analyze that information from both sides of the argument. And then question your conclusion. Why do you believe what you believe or think what you think? Is it logical? Is it emotional? Is it feeling? Are there errors in your approach? And could you come to a different conclusion with the same evidence? So the final part of your chapter talks about values. The value of self-respect, which really might be positioned from admiration from others, but more importantly, are you proud of who you are? Do you live with integrity? Do you honor your own values? Can you respect yourself? Do you honor your commitments? Are you intentional and thoughtful about considering something through before you make an agreement to do something or to be something or be somewhere for someone? Do you write down and organize your ideas and thoughts and how you're going to follow through and what your commitments are? Do you use those self-management tools that we talked about in the previous chapters? And how do you communicate when challenges arise? Do you let the person know that you might be late or that you ran into a challenge and you need to strategize on how you can fix that? This isn't in your book, but I added them. How do you also practice self-care in your life? I want you to know that you should be prioritizing you. You cannot take care of others or even meet your goals in life and be successful if you're not intentional and committed to you, to your health and functioning and well-being. You have to be able to create healthy boundaries, assess those boundaries, and then reinforce those boundaries with others, right? Sometimes people want to violate those boundaries, and you have to remind them of what your boundaries are. You have to say no multiple times sometimes, and that's okay. And then finally, I'm going to say that one of my core values is lifelong learning. Personal growth is so important to me, and I have to have people in my life that support my growth and well being. If you stay in one place too long, stagnant, it's so unhealthy and toxic. In fact, being sedentary and sitting on your ass all the time leads to death. So we gotta be growing, gotta be moving forward in life. So I'm going to encourage you to consider the value of adopting lifelong learning as a core value for yourself. And then I want you to close with thinking about what values are important to you. What kind of person do you want to be? And then with that, think about what information will you need to learn? How will you need to continue to seek out new information throughout your life to continue to strive to be that person or to continue to succeed in those areas of life? Hopefully this has been helpful for you. Work on your journals, and I'll see you back next week. Take care, everyone.